This episode explores what narcissistic mothering looks like, how it shapes the child's nervous system, how those patterns can show up later in parenting, and how awareness, differentiation, emotional regulation, and repair can help break the intergenerational cycle. Have you ever had a moment with your own child where you heard your mother's voice come out of your mouth? Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was the sharp comment. Maybe it was the way you suddenly felt personally rejected because your child pushed back, had a different opinion, or did not need you in the way you expected, and then almost immediately you thought, "Oh no, where did that come from?" That moment can feel terrifying. It can feel like emotional whiplash. 1 second you are parenting your child, and the next second you are standing face to face with an old family pattern you swore you would never repeat. But here is what I want you to know from the very beginning. Seeing the pattern does not mean you are becoming your mother. Seeing the pattern means the pattern is no longer invisible. And invisible patterns are the ones that run the family. Today, we are talking about the narcissistic mother, not as a way to blame every painful childhood moment on one person. We are talking about the psychological and family systems impact of growing up with a mother whose emotional needs, image, control, victimhood, approval, or sense of importance became the organizing force in the home. Because when you are raised by a narcissistic mother, you often do not just leave childhood with memories. You leave with a nervous system shaped around monitoring, pleasing, anticipating, explaining, apologizing, shrinking, performing, or trying to become whatever version of yourself kept the peace. And then one day, you become the parent. Suddenly, your child's feelings activate old fear. Your child's independence feels like rejection. Your child's anger feels dangerous. Your child's ADHD, anxiety, defiance, messiness, or emotional intensity can press on places inside you that were never fully healed. And without realizing it, you may find yourself either repeating parts of the pattern or overcorrecting so hard that you lose boundaries altogether. Today, we are going deep. We are going to define narcissistic mothering. We are going to talk about overt and covert narcissistic patterns. We are going to explore emotional caretaking, hypervigilance, parentification, enmeshment, differentiation of self, intergenerational transmission, nervous system activation, and why your child's ordinary development may sometimes feel threatening when you were never allowed to be fully separate yourself. Because the goal is not to shame you. The goal is to help you see clearly, and when you can see clearly, you can choose differently. Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I'm Stephanie Buckley, parenting strategist, family systems coach, ADHD specialist, and someone who looks at parenting through the full emotional ecosystem of the family. I specialize in helping parents understand ADHD, executive functioning, emotional regulation, anxiety, family dynamics, intergenerational patterns, and the relational loops that keep families stuck in the same exhausting cycles. I am also a mother to a now thriving neurodivergent 23-year-old son, and I have been married for over 3 decades. So when I talk about parenting, I am not talking about perfect theory from a perfect little clinical cloud where everyone uses calm voices and children say, "Thank you, mother, for that helpful boundary." Real parenting happens in kitchens, cars, messy bedrooms, school mornings, sports schedules, late night worries, and moments where you are trying to regulate your own nervous system while helping your child regulate theirs. And today's episode is tender because many parents are carrying invisible wounds from the way they were mothered. Sometimes they know it clearly. Sometimes they only feel it in flashes. They feel it when they over-apologize to their children. They feel it when their child is upset, and they panic. They feel it when they cannot tolerate being disliked by their child. They feel it when they become overly controlling because uncertainty feels unsafe. They feel it when they swing the other direction and become permissive because they are terrified of being anything like their own mother. This is why we have to talk about narcissistic mothering carefully and accurately. A narcissistic mother is not simply a mother who made mistakes. All mothers make mistakes. A narcissistic mother is not simply a mother who liked attention, had a big personality, wanted things done her way, or had moments of selfishness. We are talking about a repeated relational pattern where the mother's need for admiration, control, emotional reassurance, superiority, victimhood, or image protection consistently took priority over the child's separate emotional reality. And I want to say this clearly. Many narcissistic mothers were also wounded. Many were raised in families where they were unseen, shamed, controlled, emotionally neglected, or taught that love had to be earned through performance. Understanding that may create compassion, but it does not erase impact. Explanation is not the same as excuse. We can hold two truths at the same time. Your mother may have had wounds, and she still may have wounded you. That is emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is the ability to hold complexity without collapsing into denial or blame, and that is exactly what we are doing today. Before we go further, we need to define narcissism with precision. Narcissism refers to a pattern of self-focused thinking and behavior that often includes entitlement, a deep need for admiration, difficulty with empathy, sensitivity to criticism, and a strong need to protect the self-image. When we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, we are talking about a formal clinical diagnosis. But many people display narcissistic traits without ever receiving a diagnosis. In family systems work, we often focus less on the label and more on the pattern because children are shaped by the repeated emotional environment, not by whether the parent ever sat in front of a clinician and received a diagnosis. A narcissistic mother often struggles to see her child as a separate person with their own feelings, preferences, needs, temperament, identity, and developmental path. Instead, the child becomes an extension of the mother's image, emotional needs, or sense of control. If the child performs well, the mother may experience that as proof of her own superiority. If the child struggles, the mother may experience that as embarrassment, betrayal, disrespect, or evidence that the child is defective. This is one of the deepest wounds of narcissistic mothering. The child is not consistently mirrored accurately. Mirroring is a developmental psychology term that refers to the way a caregiver reflects a child's emotional experience back to them. Healthy mirroring sounds like, "You are sad because your friend did not include you," or "You are proud of yourself because you worked hard," or "You are angry because that felt unfair." Through mirroring, a child learns, "My inner world makes sense. My feelings can be named. My experiences are real." Healthy mirroring helps build self-awareness, emotional regulation, and secure attachment. A narcissistic mother often mirrors the child through her own needs instead. If the child is sad, the mother may feel inconvenienced. If the child is angry, the mother may feel attacked. If the child is successful, the mother may take credit. If the child is independent, the mother may feel abandoned. If the child is different, the mother may feel exposed. The child does not receive a clean reflection of themselves. They receive a distorted reflection filtered through the mother's ego. And this is where the child begins to adapt. A child raised by a narcissistic mother often learns to become whatever role helps the family system stay balanced and helps the mother remain emotionally protected. One child may become the achiever, the one who earns praise, performs well, looks impressive from the outside, and gives the mother something to brag about. Another may become the good child, the one who causes no trouble, asks for very little, and quietly learns that compliance is the safest way to stay connected. Another may become the funny one, using humor to soften tension, distract from conflict, or make the room feel lighter when the emotional atmosphere becomes too heavy. Another may become the quiet one, disappearing into the background because being unnoticed feels safer than being criticized, controlled, or emotionally used. Some children become the emotional caretaker, the one who monitors the mother's mood, comforts her when she is upset, and learns far too early how to manage adult emotions. Others become the invisible one, the child who minimizes their own needs because they have learned that needing too much creates conflict, guilt, or rejection. Some become the scapegoat, the child who carries the blame for the family's tension, dysfunction, or emotional discomfort. Others become the fixer, the one who tries to solve problems, smooth things over, explain everyone to everyone else, and keep the family from falling apart. And then there is the child who becomes very good at reading the room. This child studies tone, facial expression, silence, posture, and mood shifts with almost clinical precision. They know when to speak, when to disappear, when to perform, when to apologize, when to comfort, and when to become small. This is not because they are naturally easygoing or unusually mature. It is because their nervous system learned that safety depended on becoming whatever the mother needed them to be in that moment. And this is why narcissistic mothering can be so difficult to name. A narcissistic mother does not always look the same from family to family. Some are obvious, loud, grandiose, controlling, image-driven, and openly critical. Others are subtle, fragile, wounded, self-sacrificing, victimized, and very difficult to confront without feeling guilty. One version may dominate through criticism and control. The other may dominate through guilt and emotional need. But both organize the family around the mother's emotional world, leaving the child to adapt, perform, shrink, soothe, or disappear in order to stay connected. The overt narcissistic mother is usually easier to identify. She may be dramatic, attention-seeking, competitive, image-focused, and openly critical. She may need to be admired. She may see her child's accomplishments as her own trophies. If the child wins an award, she may say, "I always knew my hard work would pay off," as though the child's success exists to confirm her parenting. If the child looks beautiful, talented, athletic, or successful, she may parade the child publicly while privately criticizing them. If the child embarrasses her, struggles academically, gains weight, has emotional problems, or refuses to perform the family image, she may become cold, ashamed, or punitive. An overt narcissistic mother may compete with her daughter's beauty, her son's attention, her child's popularity, or even her child's relationship with the other parent. Competition from a parent is profoundly confusing because children are wired to seek approval from caregivers, not rival them. A daughter should not feel like her mother is threatened by her confidence. A son should not feel like his mother needs him to emotionally prioritize her over his own life. Children should not have to shrink, so a parent can feel large. The covert narcissistic mother is often harder to identify because she does not necessarily present as grandiose. She may present as wounded, self-sacrificing, fragile, misunderstood, morally superior, or endlessly victimized. She may say things like, "After everything I have done for you," or "I guess I am just the worst mother," or "Nobody appreciates me," or "I gave up my whole life for this family." Her control may come through guilt rather than direct domination. This type of mother can be especially confusing because she may appear loving on the surface. She may do a lot. She may cook, volunteer, drive, organize, give gifts, show up, and sacrifice. But the emotional cost is high because the child is made responsible for appreciating her enough, reassuring her enough, needing her enough, and not becoming too separate. The covert narcissistic mother often uses something I call emotional debt. Emotional debt is the internalized feeling that you owe someone your loyalty, attention, agreement, availability, or emotional caretaking because of what they have done for you. It is not the same as gratitude. Gratitude is freely felt. Emotional debt is enforced. Gratitude says, "I appreciate what you did for me." Emotional debt says, Because you did something for me, I am no longer fully free to have my own boundaries, preferences, or separate life. In a healthy parent-child relationship, the parent gives because the child needs care, guidance, protection, and support. The child may feel thankful, but they are not expected to repay the parent by becoming emotionally responsible for the parent's happiness. A narcissistic mother, especially a covert narcissistic mother, may give generously on the surface while keeping a silent emotional ledger underneath. She may drive, cook, pay, help, sacrifice, organize, show up, or offer support. But the child slowly learns that these acts are not always free expressions of love. They may later be used as evidence in an emotional courtroom. After everything I did for you, I sacrificed my whole life for this family. I guess I just do everything and get nothing back. You would not be where you are without me. The child learns that love comes with an invoice, care comes with conditions, help becomes leverage, and the nervous system begins to understand that receiving from this mother may eventually cost them something. For example, a healthy mother might say, I am so happy to help you move into college. This is a big transition, and I want you to feel supported. That message gives the child room to feel excited, nervous, separate, and grateful without being emotionally captured. A covert narcissistic mother may perform the same exact task, pack the same boxes, buy the same dorm supplies, and make the same long drive. But the emotional message is different. She may say later, I cannot believe how much I did for you, and now you barely call. Or, you had no problem needing me when you were moving in, but now suddenly you are too busy. The behavior looked like support, but the underlying transaction was control. The child was not just being helped. The child was being enrolled in an obligation. This is why covert narcissistic mothering can be so confusing. From the outside, other people may see a devoted mother. They may see sacrifice, involvement, generosity, and effort. But the child feels the emotional strings attached. They feel the pressure to reassure her, include her, prioritize her, praise her, and protect her from feeling unappreciated. Over time, the child may become anxious around receiving help because help does not feel safe. It feels like a future accusation waiting patiently in the corner with a clipboard. Both overt and covert narcissistic mothering leave the child with the same central wound. I am not fully allowed to be myself. The overt narcissistic mother may communicate this through criticism, competition, control, or image management. The covert narcissistic mother may communicate it through guilt, martyrdom, emotional fragility, or victimhood. But the child receives the same message. You may be loved as long as you serve my emotional needs, protect my image, stabilize my insecurity, or make me feel important. That is far too heavy for a child to carry. A child is not supposed to be the emotional repayment plan for a parent's sacrifice. A child is supposed to be loved, guided, protected, and gradually released into their own separate life. One of the most common outcomes of being raised by a narcissistic mother is becoming an emotional caretaker. Emotional caretaking means becoming responsible for monitoring, managing, soothing, or preventing another person's emotional reactions. This often begins in childhood, when a child learns that the mother's mood determines the emotional safety of the home. This child becomes highly skilled at reading tiny signals, the sound of the car pulling into the driveway, the way the cabinet closes, the silence after school, the look on her face, the tone in her voice, the heaviness in the room. The child becomes a nervous system detective, constantly scanning for clues about what kind of day it is going to be. This is called hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is a nervous system state in which the body stays on alert for danger, threat, or emotional volatility. In childhood, hypervigilance may be adaptive. It helps the child anticipate conflict. It helps them avoid criticism. It helps them prepare for the emotional storm. But later, as an adult and parent, that same hypervigilance can become exhausting. Now your child is upset, and your nervous system reacts as if your mother is upset. Your child says, "I hate this dinner," and suddenly your body feels the old panic of disappointing someone. Your teenager rolls their eyes, and you feel the old threat of rejection. Your child melts down over homework, and you feel responsible for fixing it immediately, not because the homework is the whole problem, but because your body learned long ago that someone else's distress is your emergency. This is where parenting can become tangled. You may over-explain because you are trying to prevent anger. You may over-apologize because your child's disappointment feels intolerable. You may give in because a child's upset feels like danger, or you may swing the other way and become controlling because emotional unpredictability feels unbearable. This is why understanding your nervous system matters. Your reaction may not be only about your child. It may be about the historical echo your child's emotion awakens inside of you. Emotional flashback is a useful term here. An emotional flashback is when the body re-experiences the emotional state of a past wound without necessarily having a clear memory attached to it. You may not be thinking, "This reminds me of my mother." You may simply feel small, panicked, defensive, guilty, or desperate to restore peace. Your body remembers what your mind has not fully named yet. And when you can name that, you gain space. Instead of thinking, "My child is making me feel this way," you can begin to say, "My child's emotion is activating an old pattern in me. I can pause, I can breathe, I can respond to the child in front of me, not the mother from my past." That is powerful work. Another deep impact of narcissistic mothering is difficulty with separateness. Separateness means being able to have your own thoughts, feelings, preferences, identity, needs, beliefs, and life direction, while still remaining emotionally connected to others. In healthy development, a child gradually becomes more separate. They say no. They develop preferences. They choose clothes. They make friends. They disagree. They become private. They form opinions. They individuate. Individuation is the developmental process of becoming a distinct self. It is not rejection. It is not betrayal. It is how a child becomes a person. But a narcissistic mother often experiences the child's individuation as a threat. If the child likes different music, chooses a different career, dates someone she does not approve of, sets a boundary, moves away, becomes close with another adult, or parents differently, the mother may interpret it as disrespect, abandonment, or humiliation. The child learns that separateness costs connection. They may become fused. Emotional fusion means two people's emotional worlds are overly merged. The child feels responsible for the mother's feelings, and the mother feels entitled to access the child's inner life. There may be little room for privacy, disagreement, or healthy distance. Fusion can sound loving because the family may say, "We are just very close," but true closeness allows separateness. Fusion demands sameness. Later, when that child becomes a parent, separateness can become complicated. Your own child's independence may trigger old pain. If your child says, "I do not want to wear that," you may feel rejected. If your teen wants privacy, you may feel shut out. If your young adult chooses a path different from what you imagined, you may feel grief, fear, or loss of control. You may intellectually know they are supposed to become separate, but emotionally it may feel like abandonment. This is where differentiation of self becomes essential. Differentiation of self, from Bowen family systems theory, is the ability to remain emotionally connected to others while also staying grounded in your own identity, values, and emotional clarity. A differentiated parent can say, "My child is allowed to be different from me, and I can still love them. My child can be upset with me, and I can still hold a boundary. My child can choose something I would not choose, and I do not have to make it about my worth." Low differentiation says, "If my child is upset, I am failing." Healthy differentiation says, "My child is upset and I can stay steady." Low differentiation says, "If my child disagrees with me, they are disrespecting me." Healthy differentiation says, my child is becoming a separate person, and I can guide without controlling. Low differentiation says, I need my child to validate that I am a good parent. Healthy differentiation says, my parenting is grounded in my values, not in my child's temporary approval. This is not easy, especially if you grew up with a mother who made her feelings the emotional law of the home. But differentiation is one of the most important ways you break the cycle. Now let us talk about how these old wounds can show up in your parenting. One way is overcorrection. Overcorrection happens when you are so determined not to repeat your mother's pattern that you swing too far in the opposite direction. If your mother was controlling, you may struggle to set limits at all. If your mother was critical, you may avoid giving correction even when your child needs it. If your mother used guilt, you may become so afraid of your child feeling bad that you rescue them from natural consequences. If your mother dismissed your feelings, you may treat every feeling your child has as urgent and equal to a crisis. This is understandable. It comes from love. It comes from the vow, my child will never feel the way I felt. But sometimes the opposite of dysfunction is not health. Sometimes it is just dysfunction facing the other direction. For example, if you grew up with a mother who controlled everything, you may let your child control too much because boundaries feel mean. But children need boundaries. Boundaries help the nervous system feel safe. A child without boundaries may feel powerful in the moment, but anxious underneath because the family hierarchy is unclear. Children are not supposed to be the emotional CEO of the house. They need loving leadership. Another way the pattern shows up is over-identification. Over-identification means you see your own childhood pain in your child's experience so strongly that you have difficulty separating their reality from yours. Your child feels left out of a birthday party, and suddenly you are emotionally back in 5th grade, feeling rejected and unseen. Your child is criticized by a teacher, and you feel the old rage of not being protected. Your child says, you are being unfair, and your body remembers every time your own feelings were dismissed. Your empathy is beautiful, but if it becomes fused, it may make it harder to parent clearly. Your child needs your compassion, but they also need your regulation. They need you to know the difference between their pain and your old wound. A third pattern is approval hunger. Approval hunger is the deep desire to be seen as good, loving, needed, appreciated, or chosen. If you were raised by a narcissistic mother, approval may have been inconsistent or conditional. So now, as a parent, you may crave signs that your child sees you as good. When they are happy with you, you feel safe. When they are angry with you, you feel like you are failing. This can make normal parenting moments feel emotionally enormous. Your child saying, "You are the worst," may feel unbearable. Your teen shutting their bedroom door may feel like rejection. Your young adult not calling back may feel like abandonment. But parenting requires the ability to tolerate being temporarily disliked. A child's displeasure is not always evidence of harm. Sometimes it is evidence that a boundary is doing its job. This is where the phrase regulated leadership becomes useful. Regulated leadership means staying emotionally grounded while providing structure, limits, warmth, and direction. It is not authoritarian control. It is not permissive collapse. It is the calm authority of a parent who can say, "I love you too much to let your temporary feelings run the whole family." That is not narcissistic. That is secure parenting. If you are parenting a child with ADHD, these patterns become even more layered. Children with ADHD often have challenges with emotional regulation, executive function, impulsivity, working memory, and task initiation. Emotional regulation is the ability to manage emotional intensity without becoming overwhelmed by it. Executive function is the brain's management system, helping with planning, organizing, time management, impulse control, and follow-through. Working memory is the ability to hold information in mind long enough to use it. Task initiation is the ability to begin a task. especially when it is boring, overwhelming, unclear, or delayed in reward. Now imagine trying to parent those challenges when your own nervous system was shaped by a narcissistic mother. Your child melts down, and your body feels unsafe. Your child forgets again, and you hear your mother's criticism in your head. Your child argues, and you feel personally attacked. Your child needs repeated support, and you fear you are being used. Your child struggles with independence, and you worry you are failing. Your child's dysregulation activates your old fear of emotional chaos. This does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are parenting with a nervous system that had to survive before it had a chance to fully develop safety. ADHD children need co-regulation. Co-regulation means one nervous system helps another nervous system return to calm. This is not the same as rescuing. Co-regulation is not saying, you do not have to do the homework. Co-regulation is saying, your brain is overwhelmed. We are going to reduce the noise, break this into one step, set a timer for 5 minutes, and begin together. But if you grew up with a narcissistic mother, your child's dysregulation may activate your own dysregulation. Instead of co-regulation, the family may slip into co-dysregulation, where one person's emotional storm intensifies the other person's storm. Your child yells, you panic. You panic, they escalate. They escalate, you overtalk. You overtalk, they shut down. Now nobody's prefrontal cortex is driving the bus. The amygdala has the keys, and, frankly, it is not a safe driver. This is why your own regulation is not a luxury. It is a parenting intervention. When you pause before responding, you are doing more than calming yourself down in that single moment. You are interrupting a family pattern that may have been running for generations. A pause creates space between the trigger and the reaction. That space matters because it gives your nervous system time to recognize, I am activated, but I do not have to respond from activation. When you say to your child, I need a moment before I answer, you are modeling nervous system awareness. You are teaching your child that feelings can be noticed without being immediately acted out. You are showing them that regulation is not pretending you are calm. Regulation is the ability to know when you are not calm and choose a response that protects the relationship. When you repair after overreacting, you are teaching accountability in one of the most powerful ways possible. You are showing your child that adults can take ownership without collapsing into shame. You are modeling that a person can say, I did not handle that well, without making the child responsible for comforting them. This is especially important if you grew up in a family where adults denied, blamed, punished, or pretended nothing happened. Repair teaches a child that conflict does not have to mean disconnection. It teaches them that love can survive hard conversations. It teaches them that being wrong is not the same as being bad. When you create structure instead of relying on lectures, you are giving the ADHD brain a better chance. ADHD does not respond well to repeated speeches, emotional pressure, or vague expectations. The ADHD brain usually needs external systems because the internal management system, which includes planning, time awareness, task initiation, working memory, impulse control, and follow-through, can be inconsistent. A visual checklist, a clear routine, a timer, a written plan, a designated place for backpacks, a predictable homework rhythm, or a short reset plan does more for the ADHD brain than another lecture about responsibility. This is not lowering the bar. This is building a bridge to the bar. And when you stop interpreting your child's struggle as a reflection of your worth, you become freer to parent the child who is actually in front of you. Your child's dysregulation does not mean you are failing. Your child's forgetfulness does not mean you are not trying hard enough. Your child's meltdown does not mean you are a bad parent. It means there is a skill gap, a nervous system overload, an executive function challenge, a developmental need, or a family pattern asking to be understood more clearly. When you separate your child's struggle from your identity, you can respond with more precision. You can ask, what does this child need to succeed? Instead of, what does this behavior say about me? One of the most important concepts in this episode is intergenerational transmission. Intergenerational transmission means that emotional patterns, coping strategies, trauma responses, family roles, beliefs, and relational habits can be passed from one generation to the next. These patterns are not always passed down through direct instruction. Often, they are passed down through emotional atmosphere. A child learns how conflict works by watching how adults handle conflict. A child learns whether feelings are safe by watching how adults respond to feelings. A child learns whether love is conditional by noticing whether connection disappears when they disappoint someone. This does not happen because people consciously decide to repeat harm. It happens because what is unprocessed often gets reenacted. A mother who was controlled may become controlling because control once felt like the only way to create safety. A daughter who was shamed may become overly permissive because she is terrified of making her child feel the way she once felt. A child who was parentified may become the over-functioning parent because taking care of everyone else became their earliest identity. A person who was emotionally ignored may become highly reactive to being unseen because the old wound of invisibility is still tender. A person who was never allowed to have needs may become resentful when their child has many needs because the child's dependency activates grief over what they never received. This is why family systems work is so powerful. It helps us stop asking only, why did I react that way? And start asking the deeper question, where did this pattern come from? What purpose did it once serve? And is it still serving me now? That question creates compassion without removing responsibility. It allows us to understand that many of our current reactions began as childhood adaptations. An adaptation is a survival strategy the nervous system develops to help us get through an environment. The problem is that a strategy that helped us survive one family system may not help us parent well in another. For example, hypervigilance may have helped you survive your mother's moods. Hypervigilance means your nervous system stayed on alert, constantly scanning for emotional danger. As a child, that may have helped you predict when criticism, withdrawal, anger, guilt, or emotional chaos was coming. But now, as a parent, that same hypervigilance may make you overreact to your child's disappointment, silence, eye roll, or frustration. Your body may respond as if danger is happening even when your child is simply having an age-appropriate feeling. People-pleasing may have helped you stay connected to a mother who withdrew love, approval, or warmth when you disappointed her. People-pleasing is the pattern of managing other people's emotions by becoming agreeable, accommodating, apologetic, or self-sacrificing. In childhood, it may have helped you avoid conflict or keep connection. But now, as a parent, people-pleasing may make it hard to hold boundaries with your teenager. You may say yes when you need to say no. You may over-explain limits because you are trying to get your child to approve of the boundary. You may feel guilty when your child is upset, even when the limit is healthy and necessary. Perfectionism may have helped you earn approval in childhood. If love, praise, or safety felt tied to performance, perfectionism may have become your way of trying to stay protected. Perfectionism is not simply wanting things done well. Perfectionism is often an anxiety strategy. It says, if I do everything right, maybe I will be safe, maybe I will not be criticized, maybe nobody will be disappointed, maybe I can prevent emotional pain. But in parenting, perfectionism can create pressure for both the parent and the child. The home may start to feel tense, rigid, and performance-based. The child may feel they have to succeed, behave, look good, or regulate quickly in order to protect the parent's anxiety. This is where we can accidentally recreate the very pattern we are trying to escape. A parent who never wanted to shame their child may still create pressure through perfectionism. A parent who never wanted to control their child may become controlling because uncertainty feels unsafe. A parent who never wanted to repeat emotional neglect may become over-involved because separateness feels like abandonment. That is why awareness is so important. Without awareness, we often swing between repeating the old pattern and overcorrecting against it. Neither one is true freedom. Breaking the cycle does not require perfection. In fact, perfection is often part of the old cycle. Breaking the cycle requires awareness, repair, and repeated moments of choosing a different response. It requires the courage to pause and say, "This reaction is familiar, but it may not be helpful." It requires the humility to repair and say, "I got activated, and I want to try that again." It requires the compassion to understand where your reactions came from without using that history as permission to stay stuck. And that is deeply hopeful, because it means one imperfect, reflective parent can change the emotional inheritance of a family. You do not have to get every moment right. You do not have to erase your past before you can parent well. You do not have to become perfectly regulated before you can be healing for your child. Every time you pause, repair, name the pattern, set a healthier boundary, or respond from your values instead of your wounds, you are changing the family story. That is how cycles break. Not all at once, but one conscious moment at a time. If you grew up with a narcissistic mother, you may not have experienced much true repair. There may have been denial, where painful moments were brushed aside as if they never happened. There may have been blame, where your feelings became evidence that you were too sensitive, too dramatic, or too difficult. There may have been silence, where conflict was never resolved, only buried. There may have been guilt, where you ended up comforting the very person who hurt you, or there may have been that strange family performance where everyone pretended everything was fine, even though your nervous system knew something was still unfinished. True repair may have been rare because repair requires emotional maturity. It requires a parent to pause, reflect, take ownership, and care more about the relationship than about protecting their image. In narcissistic family systems, that is often difficult because accountability can feel like a threat to the parent's ego. Instead of saying, "I hurt you," the parent may say, "You misunderstood me." Instead of saying, "I should not have said that," they may say, "You made me angry." Instead of returning to connection, they may rewrite the story, minimize the harm, or expect the child to move on without ever naming what happened. Repair is the process of returning to connection after a rupture. A rupture is any moment where there is disconnection, hurt, misunderstanding, conflict, fear, shame, or emotional distance between two people. All families have ruptures. Every parent gets tired, sharp, distracted, impatient, overwhelmed, or reactive at times. The difference between a healthy family system and an unhealthy one is not whether rupture happens. Rupture will happen. The difference is whether the adults know how to come back and repair. Repair sounds like, "I got too sharp earlier, and I am sorry. You did not deserve that tone." It sounds like, "Your behavior still needed a limit, but the way I delivered that limit was not okay." It sounds like, "I felt overwhelmed and I reacted from that place. I am working on pausing before I respond." It sounds like, "You are not responsible for my feelings. I am the adult, and I am learning how to handle my emotions more responsibly." It sounds like, "We can talk about what happened without attacking who you are." And that last part matters deeply. Healthy repair separates the behavior from the child's identity. It says, "Something happened that needs to be addressed," without saying, "You are bad." It allows accountability without humiliation. It allows correction without emotional exile. It teaches a child that conflict does not have to mean abandonment, and mistakes do not have to mean shame. That is one of the most powerful gifts a parent can give. The experience of rupture, followed by safe return. This is one of the most powerful ways to break narcissistic patterns because narcissistic family systems often cannot tolerate accountability. Accountability threatens the image. Repair protects the relationship. Notice the difference. A narcissistic apology may sound like, "I am sorry you feel that way." That is not repair. A shame-based apology may sound like, "Fine, I am the worst mother." That makes the child comfort the parent. That is also not repair. A healthy apology sounds like, "I am sorry I raised my voice. You did not deserve that. We still need to talk about the behavior, but I want to own my part first." That teaches the child something extraordinary. It teaches them that authority and humility can coexist. It teaches them that parents can be strong and accountable. It teaches them that conflict does not have to destroy connection. It teaches them that mistakes are not identity. They are moments that can be repaired. And for the parent who grew up without repair, offering repair to your child can feel both healing and heartbreaking. You may think, "Why didn't anyone do this for me?" That grief is real. Let yourself feel it. But also notice this: you are becoming the parent you needed. That matters. The first practical step is to name the pattern without shaming yourself. You might say to yourself, "My child's anger activates old fear in me," or "I tend to over-explain because I am afraid of being misunderstood," or "I struggle when my child is separate because I was punished for separateness." Naming turns the pattern from an invisible force into something you can work with. The second step is to practice the pause. The pause is not passive. The pause is leadership. When your child triggers an old wound, your body may want to react immediately. But if you can pause for even a few seconds, you give the prefrontal cortex time to come back online. You might put a hand on your chest, take a breath, lower your voice, or say, "I need a minute to think before I respond." That sentence alone can interrupt generations of reactivity. The third step is to separate your child from your mother. This sounds simple, but it is profound. Your child is not your mother. Your child's disappointment is not your mother's manipulation. Your child's anger is not your mother's rage. Your child's independence is not your mother's abandonment. Your child's need is not your mother's entitlement. The nervous system may confuse them, but your conscious mind can separate them. The fourth step is to hold boundaries without guilt. A boundary is not a rejection. A boundary is a structure that protects relationship and emotional safety. You can say, "I love you," and the answer is still no. You can say, "You are allowed to be upset, and I'm not changing the limit." You can say, "I will listen when you speak respectfully." You can say, "I am not available for yelling." You can say, "We can repair this, but we are not going to pretend it did not happen." The fifth step is to make room for your child's separateness. Let your child have preferences. Let them disagree. Let them have a different temperament. Let them be quieter, louder, more athletic, less academic, more artistic, more social, more introverted, more structured, less structured, more like you, or nothing like you. Their separateness is not a threat. It is development. The sixth step is to build a support system. If you were raised by a narcissistic mother, you may be used to doing emotional labor alone, but healing requires witnesses. Support may come from therapy, coaching, trusted friends, a support group, spiritual community, or educational resources. You deserve places where your reality is not minimized, where you can learn new tools, and where you do not have to perform strength all the time. The seventh step is to practice self-compassion. Self-compassion means relating to yourself with warmth, honesty, and accountability rather than harsh self-attack. Self-compassion does not say, "Everything I do is fine." It says, "I am learning. I can own my behavior without destroying myself." This is essential because shame often keeps people stuck in the very patterns they want to change. When you are drowning in shame, you have less access to creativity, problem solving, and repair. Self-compassion gives you enough emotional safety to grow. Your children do not need you to be perfect. They need you to be emotionally honest, willing to repair, and committed to growth. They need to know they are not responsible for your emotional stability. They need to know their feelings are allowed, even when their behavior needs limits. They need to know your love is not dependent on performance, image, agreement, or emotional caretaking. They need to know they can become separate without losing connection. They need to know that conflict can lead to repair, not abandonment. They need you to say, "You are allowed to be different from me." They need you to say, "I can handle your feelings." They need you to say, "My reaction earlier was about me, not your job to fix." They need you to say, "You can make a mistake and still be loved." They need you to say, "I am the parent. You do not have to take care of me." They need you to say, "We can talk about hard things in this family." Those statements build secure attachment. Secure attachment is the emotional foundation that allows a child to feel safe, valued, protected, and free to explore the world. Secure attachment does not mean a child is always happy. It means the child trusts that the relationship can survive stress. It means they can seek comfort without feeling like a burden. It means they can make mistakes without being emotionally exiled. It means they can grow into themselves without having to manage the parent's ego. If you did not receive that kind of emotional safety from your mother, offering it to your own child may feel awkward at first. It may feel unfamiliar, tender, or even a little uncomfortable because your nervous system is learning a new language. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It does not mean fake. It does not mean you are failing. It simply means you are doing something new. And new is where the cycle begins to break. It breaks every time you pause instead of react. It breaks every time you repair instead of deny. It breaks every time you let your child have a feeling without making it about your worth. It breaks every time you offer the steadiness you once needed but did not receive. That is how a family pattern changes. Not all at once, but one conscious, compassionate, regulated moment at a time. If you grew up with a narcissistic mother, you may have spent years wondering whether it was really that bad. You may have minimized your pain because other people saw a different version of her. You may have defended her because you understood her wounds. You may have felt guilty for naming the truth because part of you still wants to be fair, loyal, and good. But truth is not betrayal. You can love your mother and still name the harm. You can understand her history and still protect yourself. You can have compassion for what shaped her and still refuse to pass the same patterns to your children. You can grieve what you did not receive and still become a source of healing in your family. And if you sometimes see traces of her in yourself, do not panic. Pause, notice, repair, choose again. The goal is not to spend the rest of your parenting life trying to prove that you are nothing like her. That may sound healing at first, because of course there is a part of you that wants distance from the pain, the guilt, the criticism, the emotional manipulation, the control, the victimhood, the coldness, or the instability you experienced. But sometimes the mission of, "I will never be like my mother," still keeps your mother emotionally centered in your parenting. She remains the reference point. She remains the shadow you are reacting against. She remains the invisible person in the room, influencing whether you say yes, whether you say no, whether you set the boundary, whether you apologize too quickly, whether you over-explain, whether you collapse into guilt, or whether you become rigid because you are terrified of losing control. When your parenting is organized around not being her, you may still be letting her define the emotional map. The deeper goal is not simply to become the opposite of her. The deeper goal is to become more fully yourself. Becoming more fully yourself means developing what Bowen family systems theory calls differentiation of self, which is the ability to stay emotionally connected to the people you love while still remaining grounded in your own thoughts, values, boundaries, and identity. Differentiation is what allows you to say, my child is upset with me, and I can still be a good parent. It allows you to say, my child is disappointed, and I do not have to rescue them from every uncomfortable feeling. It allows you to say, my child is separate from me, and their choices, moods, preferences, and reactions do not have to define my worth. If you grew up with a narcissistic mother, differentiation may not have been modeled for you. You may have learned emotional fusion instead, where one person's feelings become everyone's emergency. In emotional fusion, your mother's mood may have determined the atmosphere of the home. Her disappointment may have become your guilt. Her anger may have become your fear. Her need for admiration, control, or loyalty may have become your job. So now, in your own parenting, differentiation means learning to love your child without making your child responsible for your emotional stability. Becoming more regulated means recognizing that your nervous system may respond to your child's ordinary developmental behavior as if it is a threat from the past. Your child's eye roll may feel like disrespect so intense that your body reacts before your wisdom can speak. Your child's no may feel like rejection. Your teenager's privacy may feel like abandonment. Your child's anger may feel like danger because, in your childhood, someone else's anger may have meant punishment, withdrawal, shame, or emotional chaos. Regulation does not mean you never feel triggered. It means you begin to notice the trigger before it drives the whole car into the ditch. It means you can pause and ask, am I responding to the child in front of me, or am I responding to the mother from my past? That one question can change the entire emotional direction of a moment. It gives your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for judgment, impulse control, perspective taking, and emotional regulation, a chance to come back online before your old survival patterns take over. Becoming more honest means telling the truth without using the truth as a weapon against yourself. It means you can say, I did raise my voice without collapsing into, I am a terrible mother. It means you can say, I overreacted because I felt rejected, without blaming your child for your reaction. It means you can say, I am still learning how to hold boundaries without guilt, without pretending you have it all figured out. Honesty is not shame. Shame says, I am bad. Honesty says, something happened, and I am willing to look at it. This distinction matters because people raised by narcissistic mothers often learn to fear accountability. In a narcissistic family system, accountability may have been distorted into humiliation, blame, denial, or emotional punishment. So when you make a mistake as a parent, your body may expect attack. But healthy accountability is not an attack. Healthy accountability is a doorway to repair. Becoming more connected to your values means you stop parenting from fear and start parenting from intention. Fear-based parenting asks, how do I keep my child from being mad at me? Or, how do I avoid becoming my mother? Or, how do I make this feeling stop right now? Values-based parenting asks, what kind of parent do I want to be in this moment? What does my child need developmentally? What boundary protects the relationship? What lesson am I teaching through my tone, not just my words? When you are connected to your values, you can hold a limit without becoming harsh. You can offer warmth without becoming permissive. You can apologize without making your child comfort you. You can allow your child to feel disappointed without treating their disappointment as evidence that you have failed. Values give you an internal compass, which is especially important if your childhood taught you to scan everyone else's emotions before trusting your own. And becoming more able to love your child without needing your child to stabilize you is one of the most profound pieces of the work. A child should not have to make a parent feel lovable. A child should not have to reassure a parent that they are a good mother. A child should not have to manage a parent's loneliness, guilt, insecurity, grief, or fear of abandonment. That does not mean parents cannot have feelings. Of course, parents have feelings. parenting will humble you, stretch you, expose you, and occasionally make you wonder why socks are apparently allergic to laundry baskets. But the emotional hierarchy matters. You are the parent. Your child is the child. Your child can love you deeply, but they are not responsible for regulating your nervous system, validating your identity, or healing the wounds your mother left behind. When you release your child from that role, you give them freedom. And when you release yourself from needing your child to constantly reflect back that you are good, you give yourself freedom too. That is the work. It is not perfection, because perfection is often just anxiety dressed up as excellence. Perfection says, if I never make a mistake, I will never be criticized, rejected, or exposed. But parenting does not require perfection. It requires repair. It is not self-blame, because self-blame keeps you trapped in shame instead of moving you toward growth. Self-blame says, I am the problem. Responsibility says, I can influence the pattern. It is not denial, because denial minimizes the real impact of what happened to you and what may still be showing up in your parenting. Denial may feel protective in the short term, but it keeps the wound underground where it continues to shape behavior. And it is not overcorrection, because overcorrection can become another form of being controlled by the past. If your mother was rigid, you may become boundaryless. If she was cold, you may become emotionally overavailable. If she was critical, you may avoid correction entirely. But the opposite of dysfunction is not always health. Sometimes it is just the same wound swinging to the other extreme. The real work is awareness, repair, differentiation, compassion, and boundaries. Awareness means you can see the pattern as it is happening instead of only after the damage is done. Repair means you can return to connection after rupture and say, I did not handle that the way I wanted to. Let me try again. Differentiation means you can stay loving and grounded without becoming swallowed by your child's emotions. Compassion means you can understand why you react the way you do without excusing behavior that needs to change. And boundaries mean you can create structure, safety, and emotional clarity without using control, guilt, or shame. This is how the cycle breaks, not in one dramatic moment, but in hundreds of small, repeated choices where you pause, notice, regulate, repair, and choose from your values instead of your wounds. That is how you become the parent your child needs, not because you erased the past, but because you learned how to stop letting the past parent through you. That is how the invisible wound becomes visible, and once it is visible, it can finally begin to heal. His episode is for educational purposes and to provide support. It's not a substitute for professional mental health evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. The more we learn to recognize the signs behind the behaviors, the more compassion and support we can offer to our kids, our partners, and ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode was helpful, I'd love it if you shared it with a fellow parent, caregiver, or educator who might need it too. You can also subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes and check out additional tools and resources at thepathtoppeacetherapy.com. Follow me on Instagram at thepathtoppeacetherapy. If you are in California, I offer virtual sessions if you are not in the Hermosa Beach and South Bay area. You can book online at the Path to Peace Therapy. And as always, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, peace is possible, and you don't have to do this alone.